The talk that I'm going to give, I like to call this talk Brazil nuts. And I will explain to you in a while what exactly that means and why I call this talk Brazil nuts. How many of you know what Brazil nuts are? I run applause because I can't see it. Okay, good. I have been, as was mentioned in the introduction, I have been on this incredible ride called Not a Genuine Black Man. And the way that this happened was I'm a writer, I'm a performer, I wanted to do a one-man show, and I had no idea what to write about. And I got the advice from the great writer, comedian, director, Carl Reiner, to find the piece of ground that I alone stood on and to write from there. So I said, what's my piece of ground? And he goes, you got to figure that out. So at the time I was working for a talk radio station in San Francisco, KGO, that did talk for 75 years until very, very recently. And I had been gone out on vacation for a few weeks, and I came in and there was all this mail pile up. And in talk radio, the mail you get comes from two sources: old ladies and laptops. That's it. Nobody else writes it. So I went to this stack of mail: old lady, death threat. Old lady, death threat. Ooh, death threat from an old lady. Then I came across one that was typed with an actual typewriter. And for some reason, it just caught, I didn't know, but the fact that this was typed, about typewriter in the 21st century, I've got to see, what antique shop this came from. So I opened this up, and there was an unsigned typewritten letter that's addressed to me, unsigned, simply said, as an African American, I'm disgusted every time I hear your voice because you are not a genuine black man. And I thought, bingo, that's it. That is my piece of ground. For some reason, I have heard that nonsense for a lot of my life. And it's like, so why do people say that to me? Is it how I dress? Is it how I talk? I mean, I don't talk ghetto. When I hear the word axe, I think of it as a noun. It's not a verb. I'm going to go axe my mother. Like, who are you, Lizzie Borden? Come on. And I thought about it, and I realized it's because culturally I assimilate. That I spent my youth from the time I was 8 years old forward as the only black face in the room. When my mother decided to move us in 1972 from Hayward, California to San Leandro. Those of you who don't know where San Leandro is here in the East Bay, and it borders Oakland to the south. Now at the time, Oakland had a very healthy population, a very diverse population. A lot of African American folks lived in Oakland. But San Leandro, once you cross that border, at the Oakland-San Leandro border, San Leandro was, depending on whose numbers you believe, was somewhere between 94 and 99.9% white. And my mother, for some reason, decided this was where she wanted to live. And the reason that San Leandro was the way that it was at the time was it was a white flight destination. There were lots of African Americans who moved to Oakland during World War II. They were working in the shipyards and come from the South. And then when the war was over, decided, I'm not going back down to the South, I'll stay here. And as a result, the white population fled. And the place they fled to was San Leandro. And San Leandro had homeowners associations in place that had rules about who could and could not purchase a home in a particular neighborhood. So that's how they kept people out of color. It was enforced by the San Leandro Police Department. They used to have a cop that would sit at the border, at the San Leandro-Oakland border, and the cop's job was to follow any black, male, female, adult, child, anybody of color who crossed over that line into the city limits. Even little kids on bikes. They would follow them until either pretext to stop them, or they were so intimidated that they made a U-turn and went back to Oakland. So it was enforced by the police department, and it was known as a whites-only enclave. The National Committee Against Discrimination in Housing at the time called San Leandro a racist bastion of white supremacy. U.S. Commission on Civil Rights held hearings because they wanted to know why it was that if you were a person of color, you could not get a mortgage to buy a house in San Leandro. You could right up to the border. You know, and this is from major lenders, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, but for some reason, they wanted to, you could not get a house. You could not get a mortgage to get a home if you were a person of color and you wanted to go buy in San Leandro. So my mother was very, very prim and very proper, and my mother was a social climber. And my mother associated success in America with whiteness. My mother associated success with whiteness because that the dominant caste in this country are people who are white, people, not people of color. And so I think that she figured, she passed away when I was 14, and I think that she figured that by moving us there that it would help us in society and help us to advance because of the people we meet, the connections we make, and the opportunities that we would have. So the way she got in San Leandro, we lived in an apartment complex, and the way that she got in was she had a white girlfriend of hers go to the manager's office, get the application. My mom would fill out the application, and then her white girlfriend turned the application in, and that's how we got accepted, and that's how we got in. And come to find out, we were not the first people to do that. The first black family that owned a home in San Leandro, that's what the owner did. The owner had a friend of his buy the house, a white friend, buy the house in his name. Then once he had the house, he quit claim the deed over to this African American family. It was a doctor, an African American heart surgeon who purchased this place in like 1965, something like that. And within a week of him moving in and the neighbors finding out that there was a black family living in that neighborhood, somebody opened up on the front door with a shotgun. Oh. They blasted open his front door with a shotgun. There was a cross that was burned on the lawn of another of the black families in town. One of the most egregious stories that I heard from a member of this doctor's family was that when he was getting ready to go to senior prom, he had a friend who was a white girl whose family was friends with his mom and dad, and they decided they were going to go to senior prom together. And they weren't boyfriend and girlfriend, they were just friends, and so they were going to go. Well, word got around town that this black young man was going to take this white girl to the prom, and so the city council got involved. The San Leandro City Council held an off-the-record meeting with the mayor to decide what to do about our prom date. Think about that for a minute. All the things that are going on, you know, think about the things that your city council does. You know, think about all of the city business that goes on. And this was such a priority that they actually had a meeting off. It was off the record, so there's no minutes of it, and it theoretically didn't exist. There's no proof other than people who were in the room. And what was finally decided was that the wife of one of the city council members was friends with the mother of the young man, and the wife of another city council member was friends with the mother of the young girl, and they were tasked with getting their wives to call the mothers to say, this cannot happen. And they did that, and that is what happened. So we moved there, and you know, I don't know how much my mother knew about how bad it was for people of color at the time. As I said, she knew it was bad enough that she couldn't go and turn in an application herself that she filled out. I know she knew at least that much. But the very first day, I'm 8 years old, and she tells me why don't I go to the park? There's a park nearby, grab my bat baseball and go out and meet people, go make some friends. You know, so you know, when you're 8 years old and you move and you're new, it's always kind of scary anyway, and you don't know anybody. So I grab my bat and ball, and I'm walking down the street, and all of a sudden this car pulls up, this car full of teenagers, 3 boys and 3 girls, and they're wearing, the girls are in cheerleader outfits, the young men are in their varsity letterman jackets. And they were from nearby San Lorenzo High School. San Lorenzo was the city right next to it's not a city, it's an unincorporated area, right next to San Leandro. And they were from San Lorenzo High. And until the 1990s, San Lorenzo's High's mascot, you guys, the Grizzlies here, they were the Rebels, the Confederacy. They were the Confederacy. There were Confederate flags all over the place. They didn't have a homecoming king and homecoming queen. It was Colonel Reb and Miss Southern Belle. And the teacher's parking lot was called Mason-Dixon Lane. That was the name of the teacher's parking lot. And it's like in California. Why are you nuts? Don't you know what the Mason-Dixon Line is even? So these kids stop and they start to harass me because I am a young black boy walking down the street. They want to know what I'm doing there. And finally one of them says, let's kick his behind. And they chased me. They actually chased me in a car. Went across the street and jumping over the bushes. I made a quick right turn, and up ahead I see a police car. And I think, thank God, I'm safe. So this cop gets out, tall blonde cop. He's wearing mirrored sunglasses. And I've got my baseball bat in my hand, and I'm running towards him. And as I run towards him, he puts his hand on his gun. I'm 8 years old. And I will tell him that I'm being chased by these kids. These kids are after me. They're going to beat me up. They want to hurt me. And I'm thinking he's going to ask me where they went or you know, which direction they come from. Is there a description? Something tell me about them. All he wants to know is, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? You do not belong here. What are you doing here? And I told him where we lived, that we just moved here where we lived, and he didn't believe me. He said, you need to show me. So he gestures towards the police car. I reach the passenger side door, and he goes, hang on a second. And he takes my bat and my ball, puts them on the hood of the squad car, and then I was officially, I say I was officially baptized as a black male in the society when he actually raised my arms and he passed me down. As I said, I'm 8 years old. So after he passed me down, he puts me in the back of the squad car, and I directed to our apartment complex. And I directed him to our apartment, and he knocks on the door, my mother opens the door, and he tells her that I have been running around town, causing trouble, and using this bat as a weapon, which is a felony, which is something that's very serious, and he could have taken me to jail, but he decided to give me a break and to take me home, you know, since I said I lived there, to take me home, and he told my mother that in the future she needs to keep a closer eye on me. So, from that point forward, I realized that it was a very different world for me. And there are people who say, well, why after that did your mother move? Well, she dug her heels in. She had this idea that if a person can afford to live someplace, if a person wants to live someplace, if a person is willing to be a good citizen and a good member of a community in a place, then they should have the right to be there. It's as simple as that. So once the owners of this apartment complex, and there were 100 units in this apartment complex, once the owners found out that they had rented to African Americans, they started to harass us. They had a sewer pipe burst underneath our unit that reeked like garbage. Nobody else's unit, just ours. Reeked like garbage for days. Front door was bashed in with a crowbar, and we called the police, and they said, "Ooh, burglary attempt. You know, it might not be safe for you here. You might want to look for someplace else to stay." And we would get phone calls. You know, sometimes it would just be hang-ups. Other times, somebody would whisper the N-word. And finally, my mother decided that she was going to sue. They decided they were going to evict us. They sent an eviction notice to us saying that the 6 people that we had there, it was me, my grandmother, and my little sisters, that the 6 of us who were there were too many people to live in a 3-bedroom apartment, which is nonsense. And back in the days of housing discrimination, I mean, we still have housing discrimination today, but when it was really, really rampant, back, you know, during the time when fair housing laws first got on the books, like in the late 60s and the early 70s, that was one of the common excuses that they would use to evict somebody, was that you have too many people for these apartment units, or too many people for this unit. So my mother ended up suing. You know, this young African-American woman sues this multi-millionaire landowner who owned apartment buildings all over the place. And she was very brave and very courageous in order to do that. And finally, the way it took a couple of years, but the way that it shook out was that the judge ruled that our eviction was unwarranted and there was no legitimate reason for us to have to move, so we were allowed to stay. But it still didn't get any easier for me growing up there in the 1970s and in the 1980s. I grew up going to the store with managers following me from aisle to aisle. I remember going to Christmas shopping once to buy Malibu Barbie dolls for my little sisters because that's what I could afford. Those were the cheapest ones. And having the manager have me empty my pockets because he was sure I was shoplifting. I grew up with grown-ups, adults driving down the street yelling the N-word at me. Same thing once I started driving, it got worse. Once I got a driver's license, it got a lot worse because then I would get stopped for no reason. They would always give pretext to stop me. I've had guns pointed at my head, I can guarantee you more than anybody in this room. I was walking by, one time I was about 16 years old, I was getting the oil change in my car. And they said it would take about half an hour, and there was a record store up the street where your kids' records were like things we played music on. And I decided, okay, I'll go to the record store while they change my oil. And this car pulls up next to me, guy gets out with a gun, puts the gun in my hand. This is broad daylight, 12 noon, 1 o'clock, puts the gun in my hand and says, make one move and you're dead. And he was a plainclothes cop. And somebody in Union City who happened to be a person of color did something. So therefore, the fact that I was a person of color walking down the street made me suspect, made me suspicious. So that was my life growing up. Anytime anybody of color did anything, if they said it was a black boy who did it, I was the one. It was my front door that they had laid out there. So as a result of that, I ended up being a man of a country in some regards. I was too black for the white kids. And then it turned out later on that I was too white for the black kids because of the music I like to listen to, because of the way that I spoke, because of what my interests were. Hence the not a genuine black man label. And what I discovered through all of this, I took all of this stuff and I wrote it into this play and I wrote it into this book. And what I discovered from all of it was that what it truly means to be black in America is to be resilient. That's what blackness is. It's resilience. It's putting up with all of the nonsense. It's putting up with all of the harassment. It's putting up with all of the indignation and all of the terrible things that happen, but still continuing to find a way to put one foot in front of the other. Now, I told you at the beginning that I was going to call this talk Brazil nuts, and here's why. One of my first days in school, I was in the 3rd grade. One of my first days in school in San Leandro. My mother packed my lunch, and she packed Brazil nuts. And if you don't know what they are, they're little round nuts that are white on the inside, and actually they're hassle crack. I don't know why she packed these things for me. And I'm sitting at a lunch table with a bunch of kids, a bunch of white kids, and I pull out this baggie of Brazil nuts, and they said, "Oh, nigger toes." I said, "Excuse me? Oh, those are nigger toe nuts." And I had no idea what they were talking about, and come to find out that that's what they all called them, because that's what their parents had taught them. That's what they believed. They'd never heard of Brazil nuts before. That's what their parents taught them, that these nuts were called. So if they had lived in a situation that was diverse, if they had lived in a situation where there were more people of color, then they would know better. As today, most people in most places know better. And that's why I call this talk Brazil nuts, because to me, Brazil nuts represent diversity. If you're somebody who would use that phrase to describe these nuts, then you're using this phrase because this is what you were taught, because you don't know any better, because the person who taught you didn't know any better, because they weren't somewhere where there was diversity. I mean, and that's pretty much it. I would like to wrap up, though, by saying that as of the 2010 census, San Leandro, California is one of the most diverse cities in the United States of America. When you look at the demographics, the percentage of African Americans or Asians or whites or whatnot, San Leandro in 2010, I don't know about 2020, but 2010, it mirrored the United States. So the city became very diverse. Why did the city become diverse? It was mostly white because the kids I grew up with, their parents grew up in Oakland and ran from Oakland to San Leandro when Oakland started to get more black people. Well, the kids I grew up with, when they got older, they ran away from San Leandro as San Leandro got browner. And where did they come? San Ramon, Pleasanton, Dublin, Danville, Livermore, all the places that today are 94, 95, 96, 97% black. So diversity is important. It's important because you don't learn anything from people who are exactly like you. You don't learn anything from people who think exactly like you. You only learn from somebody whose experience is different. And among other things, the most important thing you learn is empathy. Thank you.